This is day 3, the day of the mind. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
This is day 3, the day of the mind, but we're going to finish day 2 right now. It'll take about 10, 15 minutes or something. This is very important what happens right now relative to yesterday. We didn't do this for a long time. It was the angels that created this, but just to give credit where credit's due, the actual procedure that makes this work came out of the Philippines, and it's a way of a psychic way of sweeping that is pretty amazing, actually. What we're going to do is we're going to build a pyramid in here, and we begin a vortex. It takes a little while to develop it. It takes a few minutes. And pretty soon there's like a sheet that's sweeping around this room, and it'll move right through you, and it's kind of like glue. If anything that you want to let go, you just got to kind of hold it there, and it'll take it from you. It's really easy. Just it's gone, and it goes up and goes out through the apex into another dimension, actually. But to the entities that may still be here, a lot of times they get nervous and don't decide not to do it when they really want to. And then you sleep overnight and they go, "Oh, God, I wish I had done that." Here's another opportunity, because if they just let go right now, they can go out and Archangel Michael will make sure they get home. So for you guys, it's really easy. You don't have to do anything except lay on your back and just listen to music. It's kind of strange music. This is a strange workshop, so I got to go find strange music. I can't use the Grateful Dead or anything. It doesn't. So here's what you do. You kind of pick a center point and you put all of your heads into the center point and you lay on your backs, just kind of like a wheel. You guys are having too much fun. Just relax and begin to breathe. Feel the flow of prana coming from above and below, meeting in your heart chakra from your Merkaba. And just feel that flow, and just keep breathing and feeling that flow. And if any feelings come up or anything, just let them come up, and whatever is behind that feeling, just with your inner vision, just bring that up and like lift it out of your body if you can a little bit, and this field will just take it. It's moving right through your body, so it'll take anything that you let go of right now. And when the music is over, I'll lead you from there. So I think we can begin now. So go ahead. Slowly come back to your bodies. And now this is the day of the mind, or the day of the brain. I'm going to define the brain and the mind differently. Some people kind of think they're sort of the same thing. My definition is going to be the brain is the physical organ, physically the brain. The mind is what we're walking around in right now in this room. It's the images that it generates, and it's, as we begin to understand what this is, it's very different than what almost all human beings on earth think is the truth. And so as you begin to hear this, it'll sound strange, in some ways almost crazy, but if you continue with the meditation, you will come to the place where you will be able to prove this to yourself. You'll know for sure what I'm talking about. It usually takes a while. Actually, in the traditional methods, it usually takes 20 to 40 years. I'm going to try to get it down to like tomorrow, maybe. But we'll see. But you'll probably be able to get this usually within a few months, if not. But we don't have 20 to 40 years. We may not even have a few months. I don't know. It literally could happen now, any minute. And it feels like we're really into the accelerated motion of this whole thing. But I can't second guess Mother Earth. I don't know for sure. So today is the brain. Tomorrow is the physical heart. The physical brain and the physical heart. And the physical heart also has images, just like it has a mind also. And we're going to look at the differences between these so we can understand how consciousness works. And we're actually going to map the whole thing. Most of this information has been kept somewhat secret. In fact, especially the heart work, there's almost nothing written about it in the world. Never has been. It's always been an oral tradition. And so we will be breaking some of these rules. We're trying to go fast as possible. And we're also going to give you very direct information, which will save you. It'll save you in this room right now, in the past anyway. About 1/3 of the people will be able to jump from the 20 to 40 years now. And the rest of them usually take a little bit longer. But you'll be able to do things that usually take a very long time. It's partly because science has been mixed in with meditation. This may sound funny, but you would think the ancients would have a better understanding of some of this stuff, but they didn't. Even the Great White Brotherhood, when they tried to understand about the opening of the eye, when you actually read what they're saying, where they've written it down, it's clear that they did not actually understand the physiological nature of what was actually going on. They were guessing. But they were people just like you and me. There wasn't any difference. They were going through the same stages of awareness that you and I are right now, and then finally understood it and were able to do it. But whoever wrote these things for them, I didn't really know. When we get to that point, we'll explain it. But that'll be today, I think. Yeah, today sometime. So I'm going to talk about, first of all, I want to present to you that the brain is not as important as the heart. The heart is much older. It is prior to, it happened there, before there was a brain, there was a heart. And when we'll get to it, we'll explain that. But the ancients were very much aware of this. If you go back into ancient Egypt, when they mummified a body, usually a king or a queen, and sometimes a doctor, it was what people they considered more important. They didn't do it with everyone. They did it only with certain people. They would remove all the organs out of the body, and then they had 4 clay jars, and they would put the organs in a very specific order inside of those 4 jars, except for 3 things. That's the brain, the heart, and the genitals. And everything else was put in there. And then what they did with the heart, they put it back into the body because it was essential, and also the genitals. Because when you understand what we're about to talk about, the heart and sexual energy are the key to creation. You cannot create without those 2 aspects. What did they do with the brain? They pulled it out through the nose and they threw it in the garbage can. That's how important it was to them. Why would they think that? Why would they think that the brain was just useless? And yet, they're coming from closer to the time when we were really aware. There was a time when we were where we're going, we were. And it's the reason why the universe has given us the permission to synthetically recreate this level of consciousness within you, is because you've attained it once before. At least humanity has. An individual in here may not have, but humanity has attained this before. And so it's going to take me a while to explain this. It's not something I can just rattle off a couple sentences and it would make sense. We're going to... I will say this one thing, just so that you understand this. If you go back into conception, like I think in one of the books, I don't remember which one it was. I think it was first book, I think, where we showed the geometry related to conception. It starts out as a sphere, which is the ovum, and the 10, 11, or 12 sperm come in and conceive. And then it breaks into 2 through mitosis, then it breaks into 4 and it forms a tetrahedron, then it breaks into 8 and forms a star tetrahedron. Then it goes into a tetrahedron around a tetrahedron at 16, and it keeps going until 512 cells, and it forms a toroidal field. Remember that? So it goes 512 cells, and it's hollow inside and everything. And I left it there. But since then, I've done a lot more studying with medical doctors that have explained this to me. But what that becomes is the heart. And there is a point in every one of us, all of us, where we were just a heart and nothing else. Nothing else. We had no arms, we had no legs, we had no liver or anything else, we had no brain. We were just a heart and nothing else. And then the body came out of the heart. The body was an image that the heart had created. And then it literally came out slowly. The whole thing emerged out of it. And then the heart was pushed in and pulled into the body. And then we became this more traditional image that we think of ourselves as a little fetus beginning to grow. But intuitively, you can see from that the heart is older and more primal than the brain. The brain came afterwards. The more you begin to understand this relationship between the brain and the heart, the more you see that that if you're looking for the source of things, you don't go to the brain, you go to the heart. Now, I'm going to shift subjects a little bit and go into what we began to talk about yesterday, and how the brain is affected by belief patterns. Whatever it believes to be true is what it's capable of, and it's also like a wall. It's like a cage. whatever your belief patterns are, they form a particular shape, and that's it. You can't get out of that field because you've created this image around it that won't go any further. And it's just like the story with Jesus and Peter that we were talking about yesterday, where Peter was able to walk on water until he had a doubt, and then he went into the water. And I'm going to go back to quantum physics again, and not with the world being either solid particles or on the other side, energy, but rather this idea that was presented through quantum physics that the experimenter affects the experiment. Well, just think about that. How could an experiment, if this reality is truly separate from us and on its own, running without us, then how can one person do an experiment and another person do an experiment and get a totally different result? I mean, it can be completely 180 degrees apart. It just depends on what you believe when you're doing it. It's like going back into the 60s, where you had 20 million people in the United States taking LSD. If you remember, our government did all kinds of experiments on this, and they came up and said there was chromosome breakage and lots of negative things that they were finding. And it's because our government was really, really down on this. I'm not saying it's good or bad, it's just they were. But the Canadian government was different about this. They had different feelings about it. And so they came in and they did extensive research on LSD. And I mean really extensive. And after many years of research, it was headed by David Suzuki at the University of British Columbia. And the report was handed to Premier Trudeau, who was in charge at that time. And what it stated in there was they couldn't duplicate anything that the Americans had done and didn't believe it was true. And the final result was that they believed that taking LSD was less physiologically harmful to the body than taking a single aspirin. And so it's a whole different point of view. And, well, we're going to get into this more because hidden inside of this little thing about the experimenter affects the experiment is something huge, really huge. So when you look at science itself, and especially physics, they know that's true, and I'll even get into it a little bit more in a moment, what they do know about it. But mathematics to a physicist or to a mathematician basically is their God, meaning that whatever math says, that's got to be right. Has to be. There's 2 + 2 = 4. Can't be anything else. And so as the mathematics has evolved over time, it has, along with it, is the reflection of it is what we perceive as our theories in physics. And so but what's happened along the line is that there's become anomalies, incredible anomalies that have happened. And so much so at this point that if you really understand math and physics, our physics is dead. It cannot make it. It will die eventually. It cannot keep going, and they're freaked out about it. A lot of people are, because they know they can't keep going. We've got to a certain level, and it looks like we're going great, but there are real problems, and I'll talk about some of these problems in a little bit. But because they believe it is, they came to a place, and I don't remember when this was exactly, and I'm just going to guess. I think it was about in the 50s, where it became really scary for the mathematicians and the physicists, because it was clear that they had made a huge mistake somewhere. And they didn't know. They knew where some of them were, and they didn't know if they knew where all of them were. And so they had to invent something that didn't exist. And if they couldn't find this thing that didn't exist, it was all over. And they would literally have to start over like a baby and begin again. And so in order to balance their equations, they had to find at the very, 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 very edge of the known universe these huge, huge things that they called quasars. But no one had ever seen a quasar ever before. They didn't, it was just this idea that what would fit into the mathematics and then make everything work so they could keep going. But nobody had ever seen one. And so, but they were told, the astronomers were told, you got to find it because it's there somewhere. And so you had all these people looking into space for something that no one's ever seen. And it went on for years, What do you think? I don't know. I've never seen one before. But one day, one man, and it was a man, wouldn't matter if it was a man or a woman, but it was this guy, he sees a quasar way out there. At that time, it was probably about 10 billion light years. We're at about 17 billion light years, I think, now, or something like that. But I don't know where it was exactly, but he finds one. And they're huge, they're enormous, and they're polarized with these giant streams coming out of the north and south pole of them and everything. And they break the laws of physics. They have to break the laws of physics to put our laws of physics back into balance. And so the very next day, you can just see all the telescopes on the whole side that's facing that way, all turning to that place, and they're going, wow, there really is a quasar up there, and pretty soon the whole world is going, wow, it's true. We've been saved. We found the quasar. Well, what was very interesting is the immediate time after that, suddenly they begin to see quasars everywhere, all over the place. Millions of them. Why do we never see them before? They're all over. The experimenter affects the experiment. They should have added the words big time. But they didn't. And then time went on, and the theories still didn't work. Mathematics and everything, there were still problems. The problems were almost always with gravity, because they really don't, at that time, have even the slightest idea what gravity was. And all of their theories from our understandings now were just completely wrong. And so the same way with special theory of relativity and even quantum physics and everything else, is the gravity which is the biggest problem. That's where the real problems are. And so then they started developing the superstring theory, and the mathematics of that evolved to a point where they had to stop also. I don't think they'll ever prove superstring theory, but that's just my personal opinion. But the mathematics evolved to a certain point until they are also stopped in a similar kind of position, and they couldn't go any further unless they saw these blue lines running through space. Nobody had ever seen a blue line running through space before. There's no blue lines out there. Well, they convinced the astrologers could probably find it quicker, actually. The astronomers to look for the blue lines in the same way. Everybody's looking for blue lines all over the place, and everywhere they're looking to see if they can save these blue lines, and it never happened for a long time. And finally, one person, I don't know if it was male or female, sees a blue line in the sky. The very next day, all the telescopes look up there. Same thing again. Wow, there it is true. They really do exist. And the next day, wow, they're everywhere. How come we never saw these things before? We are creating our universe as we go. And so slowly I'm going to explain that what the universe is I said in the first part, it doesn't really exist. There's nothing there, etc. In essence, the concept that is the closest in human consciousness is in Star Trek is the holodeck. We live in a holodeck, only there's no holodeck. It's the brain itself is creating it, and we think that it's real because it looks real and you can touch it and feel it and all that other stuff, but it's not real. And what all that stuff is, it's not separate from you. It is consciousness. Reality is consciousess. And if you come at it from that point of view, you'll begin to understand what the ancients are talking about in meditation and Kundalini and Kriya Yoga and all these other things. You begin to understand what's happening. Otherwise, as long as you think it's real and it's really there, you'll never get there. You'll be lost forever because it doesn't actually exist. And there was another person who became famous for a while, and unfortunately I don't have his name anymore. But you could trace this one down if you really wanted to. He had a little black box and a pad in front of it with like a joystick that he had created. And you could put anything on there. It didn't have to. So it wasn't working on magnetic fields. It didn't have to be steel or metal. You could be a piece of wood or plastic or steel or anything at all. And he could just turn this machine on and just lift it up in space and float it around the room, make it fly anywhere with no apparent power or anything. There's nothing coming from this at all. And the scientists were going crazy over this one for a long time. But the problem is that when any other scientist would sit down, and all you had to do is just turn it on and, like a game and play, it wouldn't work. It would only work for him. It's psychotronic. He'd linked with the machine and was able to make it do it, and the other scientists could not do that. This is the reason why, in science, even though somebody invents something and it's awesome and it works perfect, they say, we don't care. There has to be at least 2 independent universities in the world that can duplicate that. If they can't duplicate it, we can't use it. And it's not real, as far as they're concerned. And usually they want more. And then even when they do, the politics are so powerful in science that it doesn't override it. For example, cold fusion. We were told that those 2 guys invented cold fusion, and then the atomic industry said absolutely no, and there was this war that actually went on around this. And so they finally came up and said it's not true, it doesn't exist, right? That's what everybody was told. There's now been 22 universities that have duplicated this. It does work, but they won't let it out for politics. It is real, but they won't even let it go. In terms of free energy, personally, just me, I have seen over 40 vacuum machines in the world, all working perfectly, some better than others, some huge and making a little bit of energy, and some little making a lot of energy. But like I said before, when you're talking about energy, there's so much energy in just a cubic centimeter that you can create the entire universe with. In fact, it came from the ideas that we have of the Big Bang Theory. We came from an not infinitely small, but extremely small little spot that created the energy that came out of that created everything that we see. And so we have machines. I have machines right now sitting in California that would solve all of our energy problems tomorrow morning, and on every single level of our existence. And our government knows it. They told me in 1998 that I could put this out, and we did up the final steps, and then I was told I had to go before the secret government to get permission, so I had to go to Switzerland. And these in Switzerland, these giant hotels, like 2,000 rooms and stuff. The guy just rented the entire place and made everybody leave, and he went into the cafeteria, which would hold, I don't know how many people, but a lot. and he made him remove all the tables, and he put one table in the middle of the room, and that's where we had our meeting. And he listened to everything I had to say, and he got done. He says, go ahead and do it. We knew this was going to happen anyway. And which I got really excited about, because it was a pretty awesome thing that we had. And so we got the permission, and we came back, and then we perfected it, and then the FBI came in and told me, no, I'm sorry, you can't do it. And they wouldn't tell us why for a long time, and eventually about 6 months later they did. And that was because they said that, well, if we put out free energy, what the computer models show is that it'll absolutely crash the entire stock market for 2-3 years. And about 100 to 300 million people will die just in the first 90 days. It's like we're on heroin or something, and we have to get off of oil and all these other things, and it hurts to get off of them. It would be, but they were willing to do that. But then they found out about the environment. They knew about the environment since the 60s, but they didn't know how bad it was. And right before the turn of the century, they began to realize what the truth was, and they just said, we can't deal with both of these things at once. And they shut us down and wouldn't allow us to do it. But we have a little box that's 9 inches on each side, black, sealed, one moving part that doesn't touch anything. And the side effect is it creates 2,000 horsepower for eternity. But that just runs your lights and everything. The main thing is it's an anti-gravity field, and it really works. And it absolutely works, and it's perfect. And it's silent. And that little tiny device will lift 24,000 pounds into the air at any speed you can imagine. You could take a 24,000 pound spaceship and put it into space like an elevator if you want. Just go up like that really slow. Be very comfortable. You're only going up 100 miles or so it's no big deal. If you went 100 miles an hour, you get there in an hour, and you could have tea on the way up, Once you get out of the atmosphere, this thing will accelerate, at least mathematically, to 9/10 the speed of light in less than 3 minutes. And so, it'll really move up. We can't survive that. But there are ways that you can maximize this, and we've already figured those things out. We can get to Mars instead of 9 months. We can get there very, very quick. And you'd have gravity the whole way. You'd feel normal. But so politics are a big thing when it comes to energy. It's really too bad. I was the one, though, that went to. I've become the Emperor of Japan. He's made a relationship with me. Put it that way, I didn't make one with him. And his whole purpose, he's told me, is to save the world environmentally. That's what they want to do. And so he's very interested in these kinds of things. And so we gave exactly how to make a car run on water to the Japanese, which they did. I don't know if you know this or not. They put it out to the whole world through routers. They actually are demonstrating that they can run an automobile on just converting water into hydrogen and oxygen. We had a car here in Nevada that will, on 1 gallon of water, will go 3,200 miles. That's how much more power is in water than it is in gasoline. They were only able to get a mere 400 miles per gallon. That's the method they're using. They're using the fuel cells theory, their way of doing it. So they're converting it into chemicals and into electricity, and you lose a lot of energy doing that way. They came out with a car almost a year and a half ago, but Japan then decided not to do it. Toyota was going to do it. They were all going to come out with a water car, and then they decided not to because of the solar panel, what they're about to release. The Japanese have a solar panel that is almost as good as what I just talked about, but it doesn't have anti-gravity with it. They discovered it by accident, but it's a plastic, and the plastic is 70 to 80% efficient on light. That's amazing. I mean, the most efficient are these big, silicon cells that we have are 9 to 12% efficient, and recently they made one that's 15% efficient. This is 70 to 80% efficient. And it's 70 to 80% efficient on infrared. So it works day and night. It'll work in Alaska in the middle of a snowstorm. And if that isn't enough, the plastic is the perfect battery. It's a solid state plastic, no liquids, no nothing, no acids, anything. And it's better than any battery we've ever seen. And so this cell can produce, just 3 of them would run a huge American home. And they shouldn't cost more than $100 each. And that's almost there, but the plastic can be turned into a paint, and that's why the automobiles wanted to paint their cars. And so they're a solar collector no matter where they are, put the plastic in there, and now you've got a car that'll run day and night and never stop ever until the tires run out or something like that. And we have this. This exists. And so they decided the water car was not as good as this one is. I get to talk about this guy in Canada. There's all these Canadians here. I don't know how to say his last name, so maybe you guys can help me. Who knows French here? It's Pomerlou. 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 His first name is Denis. And this guy is amazing. And I just got to talk about him. Because it's all about this thing we're still on of the experimenter affects the experiment. He's now becoming pretty. He was. I guess it was 10 years ago when I first heard about him, approximately something like that, maybe more. I don't know. And there were scientists going up and seeing him all the time, trying to understand what he was doing because he was doing things that were impossible by everybody's standards. And they never could understand what was going on. They didn't really read their textbooks very well about the experimenter affects the experiment. But this was a man who, at the time, was about 50 years old. He must be older now. I don't know what he is. But his internal age was 12. He was just a kid inside. And what he told me was that his teacher was 5. And he had a great fear that he might someday become an adult. Because he didn't want to. And so he chose electronics. Why? I don't know, but he chose electronics. And so I traced him down. It took me a long time. It actually took me almost 3 years to find this guy because he hides. And I finally found him, and I went to his house and asked him if he would show me what he was doing. And he was very excited to show me. And so he spent about 2 or 3 hours showing me what he had. And this is really cool. I mean, it really is. And I could see why the scientists were all going in there in groves to understand what he was doing, because he broke every rule in electronics there is, just about. And so when he got all done, I said, this is very cool, didn't he? I said, would you come to one of my workshops and show it to me? Well, that's when I find out he's also superstitious. He will not cross a bridge. He will not get on an airplane or a boat. I don't remember all the restrictions, but it limited it to a very specific area. And he can't leave there. And so I had to do my workshop in that area or he couldn't come. So I did. It was up near Quebec where it was. And so we did it. And it was so cool. I'll tell you in a little bit what he did, but I'm first going to show you what he did. And okay, we're going to move this out here somewhere. Can everybody see this? Can you see it over there? Kind of like a slice on the edge. It's too colors. So he had these electrical circuits, and a long time ago people accused him of putting wires inside the wood that he made them on and everything, so he made them on acetate so you could see through it. And I'm just going to show you when he came to the workshop, the first thing I just turned it over to him. I went in the back of the room and watched it. He just sat up here. And the first thing he said to everybody is there any electrical engineers in the class? And I didn't know. There were 3 PhDs, 3. He got so excited, I thought he was going to pee in his pants. He said, wow, that's really good, that's really good. So he runs and he gets a table and he drags it over right in front of where he is. And he says, you guys sit right there. And so there's these 3 men, they sat down. And so he brings out the first board, and it was really simple. The first one was a little thing about so big, and it had a single little light bulb on it with a wire that came over with a switch that went over to a battery, only the battery went like that and never finished the circuit. So it kind of breaks the rules, but it was just barely breaking the rules from his point of view. And sure enough, he turns on the switch and it works. So he gives it to them and he says, what do you think? And they come up with this theory that he's got something wirelessly transmitting energy to it or something else like this. And he goes, okay. So he comes up with another one and he goes, a little bit more complicated. And it has 3 lights on it in series. 1, 2, 3. And then it goes to 3 switches. 1, 2, 3. And then it comes down here, and there's no battery. It's just a little wire. It goes like that and ends. And so we don't know what this is and why it doesn't connect, but he says this is the power source. But even if it was a power source and it was connected by electronics, you would have to click all 3 switches on and all 3 lights would come on. But he says, oh no, I didn't make it that way. He says, this one goes to that light, this one goes to that light, and this one goes to that light. And sure enough, that is exactly what happened. You turn this light on, you got 2 more switches in front of it, and that light goes on, and etc. And so he hands them to that. He's got 18 boards. This is the second one. By the second one, they could not explain this to anybody. They were going, I don't know, and he kept going. Then he made another one that was a little bigger, and it had a little plug that went over to a switch, and then went over to a really big coil, much bigger. And he was plugging chainsaws in here. These 1,000,000-watt light bulbs things, they're so bright they just blind you if you ever saw them, and all these different stuff and everything else. And it just, these guys couldn't even talk after a while. I mean, they were just going, I don't know. And he kept going more and more and more and more and more. And I'm going to skip all the way up to the last one. And on the last one, he, oh yeah. I'm going to skip to the last one. After he got all done, he says, okay, let's use your stuff, he says. Does anybody have a radio? 3 or 4 people ran out, came back with little boom boxes. And he says, well, just pick one. And so they did. And he says, now we're going to use your electricity, so plug it into the wall. So they plugged it into the wall. And then he says, turn it to a radio station. He turns to a radio station, playing music or whatever it was. And so he then comes over to the board like this. And he draws onto the board their radio. And he puts a little aerial on it. And he puts a wall, he puts the switch where it plugs into the wall, and then he puts a little switch right here in it, like that. And he says, okay, this is your radio now. And he says, I'll show you. And he goes over like this to the switch, and he goes, and the radio goes off. He goes, and the radio goes on. There was dead silence in the room. He came 2 or 3 times to 2 or 3 workshops. And he kept doing it and kept doing it. He says, now I want to show you something about yourself. And he goes like this. He did it about 3 times. He goes, oh, now I got it. He says, now I have the switch in my hand. And I'm going to put it in my palm. So see, it's right there. And he says, if I click it, radio goes off, radio goes on, radio goes off, radio goes on. He says, now I'm going to give it to somebody in this room, and whoever I give it to, they can do it, and they can pass it around the room. But I'm going to go away and leave you so you know I'm not psychically doing it, and I don't know when you're going to turn it off and on or anything. So he gets out, and he runs down a long hall, all the way down at the far end, and gets into a broom closet and closes the door. We're all going, okay, and then when we close the door, and this person's sitting there, and she goes, the radio goes off, radio goes on. And it starts passing it around, and every single person in the room could control turning the radio on or off. I did too. There was nothing in your hand that you could see. But with this, it would do it. Just with your intention, it would turn the radio on and off. And then he came back into the room, and he was all excited. He said, did it work? Did it work? And everybody going, yeah, it definitely worked, And he says, oh, good, good. He comes up and he says, well, and then he starts to say goodbye, and he goes, oh yeah, one more thing. He comes over here, and he takes a little line off like that, and he goes like that. He goes, that's a microphone. Watch. And he goes, hello? And it comes out the radio. Honest. It came out the radio. Anybody can come up here and talk in here, and their voice would come out the radio. It's not what we think it is. There's a different reality here than we've been told by our mom and dad. And so this guy's great, and they're actually running trips over to his house now. Germany is anyway. Somebody in Germany got excited, and they're running. And there's other people who are doing it. He was caught. I was talking to his manager because he doesn't know about money or anything, and he has somebody else that controls so he can live and everything. And his manager was telling me that he was arrested during there was a blackout 10 years ago or so in Canada and the Northeast in there, and his house was the only one after a long, long, long time that was still working fine. And they arrested him for this. They literally went to his house and arrested him. It's like, why? I don't know. And but he said that when they were taking him out, they had handcuffs on him, and they were taking him out to the car, and he just got completely freaked out. And he did a thing like Master Joe. He made his hands really little, and the handcuffs fell off. And the policeman saw this, and they just jumped in the car and drove away. I did not see that. And I don't want my handcuffs. So he was freaked out because they had arrested him once before because he was walking down the street with a lamp that was not plugged in, but it was lit up. And they put him in jail, and in jail he asked for a piece of wood, and he drew a radio on it, turned it on, and was listening to the radio. And they let him go. They didn't want him in there. So I used to have his phone number and everything, but I don't have that anymore. But you could find him. Okay. Anybody know Slim Sperling? A few of you. He was a coil master and was creating coils. These are coils that he created. I had a long talks with Denis, and he said that to make this work, you just take a piece of copper, he says works very well or something, and you start coiling it, and you coil it till it comes alive, he says. And when it comes alive, you stop, and now it's connected to the universe. And he says you have infinite energy, it never wears out. And I know exactly what he's talking about, because in my years of working with Slim, you have these coils, and they don't work until you turn them, and you have to turn them till they come alive, and you can feel it when they do. I feel it right here when they do. You can also feel it, or if you can't feel it here, you can just listen to the birds. If you go outside and you do this, and you turn it just right, and you get it just right, all the birds start chirping. And you'll hear them doing it. They can feel it too. And so anyway, Slim knew this guy. That was how I found out about him in the first place. And one of Slim's friends, which I don't have his name anymore either, went and studied with Denis for about 4 months, as what I remember. And he finally got this idea of how you make these coils. And so he did the same thing. He went back, and Slim told me that he saw this work. I didn't see it, but Slim did, where he just went back home, he took a coat hanger, took it and bent it around until it came alive, plugged it into his house, unplugged the house, plugged it in, and his house lit up. And all it was just a piece of wire. And so we can do this. But we're coming to a point right now, very soon, where we're not going to need any of this stuff. We're not going to need the technology. We're not going to need the energy. We're not going to need anything. You just need one thing. That's your body. And that's it. And we all have one. Okay. I'm going to go a little bit further on these to convince you of all this kind of stuff, just a little bit more. And when I was in Peru a long time ago, 1985 or 6, somewhere around in there, I was walking the Inca Trail from Cusco, well, not right in Cusco, but outside of Cusco up to Machu Picchu. We were one of the first people to ever do that. The trail had just been discovered about a month earlier, maybe 2 months earlier, very soon. And there was no provisions for anyone to do this, so we had to take the train up to Machu Picchu, and we got them to stop, and they stopped for 60 seconds. And this was a train filled with goats and chickens and all kinds of people and everything else like that, and you couldn't get through them. It was just packed solid. We had to climb out windows and throw our backpack out and climb out to get out of those windows. And then the train went on, and the only way I get across the Umbamba River is there was just a cable stretched across, 2 of them. And you had to hold on to one and walk over another one. There's this little tiny river down there. Get to the other side. And it was the Quechuan Indians who became our friends and led us into there. And the person who discovered the trail was a man named Narciso, who was a Quechuan shaman. He's only about 35 years old. And this guy was amazing. He was just like a little tiny child. He was so innocent on so many levels, and it was beautiful, I thought. And so as we walked for about 40 miles up to a little or higher than 14,000 feet over the cliffs, we came down to Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu is about 9,000 feet, and we were dropping down to get down to there. And when we got there, we all had different reasons why we were going there. I really wanted to go to Huayna Picchu, which is a mountain peak there. It's a very high, pointed peak. And I wanted to go on the top of there because I'd heard stories about this. And so I climbed it and got on top and did that whole thing. And then afterwards, I was done. We were basically all done. And I was kind of looking and there's about maybe 400 or 500 people walking around in Machu Picchu. And I was looking for my people. We were only, I think, 12 people or so. And I saw Narciso and a friend of mine way over, sitting on top of a rock. At that time, they had not reconstructed all the buildings. They were just, maybe that much of the building was left, and the rest of it was gone. Now they've rebuilt all these buildings and everything, so they look like the way they think they looked. And but to get to this rock, which was it was a big rock. It was about not quite half as big as this room, but 12 feet high or so, and they were on top of it. And to get to that rock, I had to climb over these kind of 3-foot-high ruins to get over to it. And there was several of these walls getting over to where this rock was. And these rooms were where they lived. And Machu Picchu was a female temple, by the way. It was totally. They found, I don't remember exact number, but about 700 bodies there. And all of them were female except for 6. And so it's pretty clear that it was not a male temple, it was a female temple. And anyway, I climbed over these things, I found my way up there on top. And Narciso and my friend, I don't think, well, his first name was Bruce, I won't say his last name. And Bruce and Narciso were sitting, and here's the edge of the rock right here. And Narciso was facing this way, cross-legged, and Bruce was facing this way, out toward Machu Picchu. And they were just a little ways apart, and they were both shamans. Bruce was sent to outside of the United States to go to high school when he was 14, and they sent him to Iran. And so he studied there, but he never came home. So he lived in over 40 countries. So he was not an American anymore. I don't know what he was. He was just a global person. But he'd lived mostly with indigenous people, so he really became a shaman over his life. And both of them were shamans. Bruce knew more about crystals than any person on earth I've ever met. And I've met a lot of them, but this guy was amazing. And to talk a little bit about Narciso, his innocence, he had never been in a car. He had never been in a city or anything like that. He'd only lived in nature. On the way up there, we're all wearing sunglasses, and he kept looking at us. Finally, he says, "Why do you guys wear those things?" And we said, "Well, it feels good." And he says, and we go a little farther, and he goes, "Can I try one?" So somebody gives him their sunglasses, and he puts it on. He goes, "Wow!" He's looking all over like this. He goes, he thought it was the most amazing thing he'd ever seen in his life. He was just blown away by it. And so the person gave him the sunglasses, and he had them on. He went to sleep with them on. This was high technology for him. And so you gotta, I'm just telling you that story just to give you the understanding of who he is. He really understands the power of what you believe and what your limits are and everything. So anyway, they both had little shamanistic bags around their necks with power objects in there, and they were showing each other their toys. And so they had a little cloth in there, and Bruce would take out one, and he says, "Well, I have this from here, and this came from Monica or somewhere," and he'd put it down, and he says, "Can I touch it?" And he'd look at it, and he says, "What does it do?" And then Bruce would explain it, and then he would take one of his out, and he says, "Well, I got this. This does sort of the same thing, like that." And he says, and Bruce would look at it, and they were exploring these things. And I was just watching. I didn't want to interrupt it. It was kind of cool. And at one point, Bruce reached into his pocket and pulled out about a 50 millimeter piezoelectric quartz sphere. It looks like glass almost, but it's actually quartz. It means that the lattice going through it is perfect. And and he doesn't show it to him at first. He says, "I have this one." He says, "Bruce," now Bruce could have said anything to him. He could have said a lot of things because I knew him very well and I knew his understanding of these things. But what he said to him was, he says, "Well, this is my most powerful object." but he's hiding it like that. And he says, but I really want you to see this. And he goes like that and gives it to him. Well, I mean, it was like shock on his face. He went, because to him, he thought it was from nature. He didn't know that we had curved it around. And he thought it was from nature. And just the fact that that would be in nature was just, it just was so much to him, so powerful. And then he says, can I touch it? And he's holding this thing and looking at it and everything. And Bruce is talking. And then he said to Bruce, well, how do you use it? And Bruce says, well, and this is where I don't know why he said this, because it could have been 1,000 things he could have said. But what he said was, well, if you hold it up to your third eye, whatever you think happens. And he says, that's when he really went, whoa. I mean, that's the ultimate power object on earth, right? He goes, whoa. And he says, can I try it? Bruce says, sure. So he scoots around and faces out toward the public out there. And there's people walking all around. Puts it up to his third eye and closes his eyes. And a few seconds went by, and then you could almost see it. The people, there was like a little jerk in time where everybody just kind of stopped. A lot of people, not all of them. Let's say there was about 400 people out there. Maybe 100 of them stopped, turned, looked at him, and started pointing at him. All at once. And they started walking here. And so over about 15 minutes, pretty soon, there's like 100 people, and they're all climbing over these walls and everything else like that. And now they're at the bottom, right underneath him, and they're all talking and pointing at him. And he opens his eyes, he looks down, takes it off, turns around to Bruce and says, hey, this thing really works. The experimenter affects the experiment. And I'll tell you one last story. When I was in about the same time, maybe a year or so difference, I was in Yucatan, and I was at Uxmal. We were not, when you go into Uxmal, there's the pyramid of the magician is right in front of you, but off to the left and a long ways away is what they call the Great Pyramid. And I was up on the Great Pyramid, and on top of the Great Pyramid is like a house. It's a little square building which you go inside of. And I was starting to go into this building, and this Japanese man comes out. I mean, he had 4 women that were with him. This Japanese man came out, and his Leonardo sphere that was around his body was glowing brightly. I'd never seen anything like this in my life. I mean, it was really bright. My reaction when I saw him, I kind of had no choice. I saw him, and he kind of walked up to me, and I just bowed to him. I mean, anybody who's got a sphere going around him has got to be somebody special. I just bowed to him, and he bowed to me, and pretty soon we're doing this thing back and forth. And then we stopped, and we dropped down into a lotus, and we sat there and just looked at him, and it became clear almost immediately that he didn't speak English and I didn't speak Japanese. So we just looked at each other for a long time, about a half an hour, I'd say. And then eventually we stood up, bowed to each other, and the women were taking pictures. I'll bring that up later in a moment. And then we bowed to each other, and we went on. And I kept thinking about him for 2 or 3 days after that, and then I forgot. Time goes on. And many years later, I'm in Japan for the first time. I was invited there by a Buddhist community who had never allowed anyone to ever speak at their Buddhist community that was not Buddhist, but I am Buddhist as well. But they didn't know that. And they asked me, they said if I would come there, the only way they would let me talk there, if I came there with a blank mind and did not know even one word what I was going to say, then they would let me talk. So I gave a workshop there, and I figured, how easy can it be? You don't have to plan anything. You don't write anything out. You just go there, stand on the stage, and start talking. You don't know where you're going to go. And that's exactly what I did. It was the first one of these workshops, by the way, of the Earth Sky Heart workshops, the first one. And so while everybody was coming into the workshop, he walks into the workshop, glowing sphere and all. And when he came in, everybody turned around and they all bowed to him, every one of them, and in unison, basically. And then he sat down, and I looked at him, and I kind of asked if I can't remember if I went to him or he came to me, but I talked to him, and I was just saying, good to see you again and everything else, and thank you for coming, but why are you here? I mean, because anybody that's on that level, I couldn't imagine why they would want to come to one of my workshops. And I finally said, I don't think you need to do this. And he said, no, I want to be here. And so by this time he could speak. This was maybe a few years later. He could speak English, sort of. And so he stayed. And during this workshop, maybe the third day or so, there was a young man in the front who spoke perfect English. And I took him aside and I said to him, who is this guy? Why is everybody... And he looked at me like, you don't know who that is? And I go, no. He says, we all know who it is. And I don't have his name right now. They've given me everything. I was going to write about him in one of the books, but I didn't. But anyway, the story that he gave me, and I've confirmed this several times over, is in Hiroshima when the bomb went off. He was 15 years old, 14 or 15 years old, I don't remember exactly. And he was only about 6 blocks from where the bomb went off. And when the explosion was coming at him very fastly, he just put his arms up like this and said, this will not affect me. And buildings were blown away and everything else like that. And they found him in the crater, sitting cross-legged. No burns, no nothing, no radiation, nothing. Absolutely perfect. And he became a symbol in the 1940s for Japan as how they can survive what this is. And the modern day Japanese don't remember him too much. It's mostly the older ones that remember who he was. He died recently, and the 4 women who were young then are now older, and they came and gave me all out of the photographs and his name and all the information and everything. And I still want to write about him at some point. But again, it's the same thing. This will not affect me. Total 100% belief. You're walking on water, an atomic bomb goes by. Nothing. So, if we remember who we really are, there's absolutely no reason for fear. This is for sure. Okay. So now I want to get into the core of all of this. And that is, why does the belief patterns not, what is it about them that what we believe changes the outer reality? And so I'm going to do this first by talking about, remember there was a DVD called The Secret that went out? And they were talking about creating. And we brought this up once before, but I'm going to bring it up again right now to go into it a little more deeply. The reason that works, yes, there is the law of attraction that pulls to you what you are thinking and feeling and acting, everything that you're emitting off of you. But there, on another level, there is a very specific procedure of how to create. But this procedure works only with the brain. And like we said, the brain is polarized. And so if you do use this procedure, I'm only talking about this right now just to get it clear how the brain works on creation, but I don't want you to use it, because there is a better way and less harmful way, far more powerful way, using the heart rather than the brain. And it's not polarized. So like I said, if you do create with the brain, you get exactly what your intention is if you do it the way we're going to put on here. But you will get an equal and opposite force. It's literally science. It's an equal and opposite force will come to you from behind in the opposite direction. You won't see it coming. It'll just appear in your life and you go, oh my God. And it's not, for sure it's going to be something you don't want. And it's just the way it is. It's the nature of what this way of creating does. And I need to refer back to this one again later. So I got to keep it on a thing. So I'm going to talk about exactly how this creation process works. And let me see where I am at on this. Oh, I was out of sequence, but it is life. First of all, Greg Braden wrote a book called The Isaiah Effect. Anybody read that book? That's the same information that was in The Secret, and it came out earlier than The Secret. And even earlier than that was where it came from, was when they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, they found another pot near there. And so Greg was just talking about what came out of this Dead Sea Scroll that was BC sometime. I don't know exactly when it was, but it was a long time ago. So this is nothing. What's in the Secret is nothing new. It's very old. This is going to be creation from the brain. And the brain, the way it starts out is, it's a thinking process. It thinks. That's what it does. It thinks and thinks and thinks, and it does thinking. And all the creation from the brain begins with thoughts. And that is the source of where the creation begins. And these thoughts are based on logic. Anything that you create from this process is going to come to you in a logical way. You're not going to see anything just go poof out of nothing. You could do that with the heart, but you can't do it with this. The Secret is primarily focused on money, it seemed to me. And so if you're going to make money, you're going to see one of your stocks go way up or something's going to happen, but you're going to see the process of how it got to you. There'll be a logical way, always a logical way, how it came in. And then under this, the brain uses attention to begin it. So whatever it's trying to create, it focuses its attention on a very specific area. Let's say it's trying to make rain, for example, or maybe trying to heal something in the body. It's all the same thing. It really doesn't make any difference what the subject is that it's focusing on. But rain is one that's kind of good for certain reasons. It's easier to see. And so then it has to put intention. It focuses attention on rain, then the intention is that there could be more rain or less rain, right? The intention is, say it's dry and you want more rain, so your intention is that it actually rain and it solves the dry problem. That's where your intention is coming from. And people do this all the time when they're praying. You know, they go into it and they pray and say, you're given this intention, I want something to happen in my life, whatever it is, there's a million different ways you can go. But they're using intention, they're intending something to happen, but it doesn't usually work. But under intention is where the secret falls in. Other than the laws of attraction, there are these three components which we've talked about before. Mental body, emotional body, and physical body. And all three of these components must be functioning fully in order for this intention to take place. If you leave one of them off, nothing happens. And so if you're wanting rain, your mental body has to see rain coming from the sky, seeing clouds, seeing dark, seeing the temperature, all seeing. It's all a seeing process, visual. And so it sees all that stuff happening. If it's a disease, say, in the body, then you would see it completely gone. Or if you could see that, say it's a skin disease and you can see it, you would see your skin normal again, etc., and all those kinds of things. And that process has to be going on while you're doing these other two things. Well, if you've been in a drought, say, for 9 years and everything's dying, and suddenly it starts raining, you're going to have an emotional response. Or if you've just had cancer and you almost died and all of a sudden it's gone, you're going to have an emotional response to these kinds of things. And you have to have the exact same emotional response as if it actually happened, even though it hasn't happened yet. So you have to see it happening, you have to feel it happening, and you actually have to, it goes to that 100% thing. If you were 100%, then you would actually be crying because you know it's going to happen. And but the one that everybody leaves off usually is the physical body. A lot of people do this and a lot of people do that, and they don't even think about this. And that's what Greg Braden went to Tibet to study with the lamas there about that, and they were the ones that told him how important this one was if you're going to do this kind of thing. And on the physical body, if it's raining, you actually have to feel rain on your skin, smell the ozone, feel the temperature drop, etc. Exactly the same sensations you would have if it suddenly started raining right now. You would have to be doing that, feeling that, emotionally having that response, and seeing it all happen. If you do all three at once, it's science. It will happen every single time. It isn't a matter of what anybody else thinks or anything else like that. It's going to happen every single time. But unfortunately, it would be nice if that was that easy, but unfortunately, because the brain is divided into two, in male and female, you get this part of your intention that you don't want. And but you need to understand that that's how the brain does its thing. So I'm going to skip now to another subject. But we'll come back to this one because tomorrow I'm going to talk about the heart. I don't think the creation process of the heart doesn't happen until the 5th day, I think. I'm not sure of that. But flip this back over here. And there is in the brain, there is something that we all have, but it is not functioning. It's kind of like the Merkaba, where all the electromagnetic fields are just sitting there, stationary, not moving. But with intention, you can do things. You can get them spinning, breathing certain ways, and you pops out, and the thing becomes alive. Well, there's another component to the Merkaba. It is more important than the Merkaba itself. And the Merkaba itself won't really function anywhere near its potential until this other component is connected to it, and which we never talked about in the first 3 books. I don't think. Definitely not in the first two books. I don't think I talked about it in Living in the Heart. I never read the book, so I don't. I don't know. Anyway, I want to give credit where credit is due. This came from the Mayans, and also from the Kahunas in Hawaii. I got this from the Mayans, and it's extremely detailed, as you're going to see. And I thought that this was something that only they knew. And then later I had two older Kahuna teachers, and when I just mentioned it to them, they said, oh yeah, we know about it. And then they described it in detail, exactly like the Mayans knew it. And so there's probably other tribes that understand this too. There are these little entryways that come out of the head. There's 10 of them actually. We're only going to use 8. And they activate this, at least the Kahunas do. I'm not positive about the Mayans, but the Kahunas told me, both of them told me that it's very, very secret. And they do it to their children when they reach puberty, that they activate it for them. And so when it's completely done, there's a thing about the human head that we normally don't know is there. I call them the beams of light, and we're going to describe them to you, how they work, what in great detail, and then when we get a chance, you're going to do it. You're going to actually do this, and roughly half of you will be able to do it now, and the other half will be able to do it in probably the next 2 or 3 weeks or so. It's not that hard to do. It's one thing about the pineal gland, which is the source of what we're about to do. It responds to intention better than anything in the body. It's really amazing. So because of that, it makes it rather easy. When you put an intention out, it happens just instantly. So drawing of a head, and well, actually, let me start with this, and we'll come back to it. This is a person, and these beams, that say the ones that come out of the side of the head, there's ones that come right over here. It's not the temples. We'll describe exactly where these spots are. It's back by the ears and slightly higher. It's the spot that enters in directly to the, if you were to go straight through, you'd hit the pineal chakra, not the gland, but the chakra. All of this is coming from the chakra. The gland is just a little bit farther away, but it's the chakra that's doing it, not the gland. So these beams that come out of the head are 1 hand length long, basically, but some of them are shorter. And you'll see why, because they conform to the shape of the head, and they fit inside of a perfect sphere. I mean, just a perfect sphere. And so because our head is not spherical, they have slightly different lengths. But they're about a hand length long. But and they look like they're exactly the same as your breathing tube. They're like a fluorescent tube. They're straight. They're perfectly straight. And if you take your middle finger and your thumb and put it together, that is the size of your beams. It depends on the size of your hands. And not only that, but if you put it around something, just a little tiny bit of pressure to push these things out, that's what you would come to the actual size of them. So they're that big around, and from here, underneath here, this place where it folds, from there to the tip of the finger is the longest one. And there's some that are a little bit shorter. But they don't look that way. Coming off the body, they haven't been used for thousands of years, and they're just fuzzy little things that kind of look like that. And this one might come up like that. And there's another one coming out the crown chakra over here. They just kind of look like little. They look like fog, and they're usually kind of a goldish color. If you're a dowser or you see auras. You probably have never seen these, because you have to know, like in dowsing, who is dowsers here? How many dowsers we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In dowsing, not with pendulums, but if you're using sticks, most people think that dowsing is just for water, but you can find anything. It doesn't matter what it is. So if you're thinking for water, then you're going to hit water. So you better think good, clean drinking water. You're going to hit the sewer lines too. So it's what you're thinking will determine how these rods work. But you can also turn it to gold, and you could feel gold. And now those same rods that found water will find only gold, or anything else on earth. It doesn't matter, whatever you think about. But you have to know that something exists before you can see it. This is an interesting part of our relationship with the external reality. What's his name? Magellan. That's it, Magellan. There we go. Thank you. Magellan came here with, I think it was 7 ships on, I think it was the west coast of South America, and he pulled into a bay with these giant ships, and and this is all written down in his journals. And he then got in a boat, and a few of them, and they rowed ashore, and they were met by quite a few indigenous people there. And I don't know how they were communicating exactly, but basically they said to Magellan, looking at these little boats, well, how did you get here? And they were looking at the boats, and he goes, oh, no, not those. The big ships are sitting out there and there. That's why we came in on those. They couldn't see them. Only one person out of about 200 people that were there could see his boats. When all the other people looked at the boats, they saw right through them because those boats were beyond their imagination, and they couldn't see them. And the only person that could see them was a shaman, and he was used to doing very unusual things. And so he was able to see the boats, but they couldn't. And this is the nature of our consciousness. It's the same way with UFOs. You can be sitting on a hill, and this has happened with me before, where I remember one time I was sitting there here's a UFO like 30 feet away. It's big, sitting right there, and I'm going, ah! And the other people are going, what are you talking about? They can't see it. It was too real. It was too close. If it was a little speck in the sky, maybe they could see that. Specks are pretty easy. Little lights moving around. Okay, I can see those, because But when it's right there in your face, it's very easy to just look right through it and not see it. And so these things I would have to teach you, even if you haven't seen them before. Once you know how to see them, they're easy. They're brighter than the auras, but you have to tune your inner vision to them to see them, and then once you do, they pop right out and you can see them. So there are 10 different places where these exits are that they come out. But this is a guy who's walking down the street. This is kind of what they look like, but that's not. That isn't what they actually look like once they're activated. You can turn them from that into these straight beams. Okay, now I'm going to give you what the person looks like, and I'm going to draw this as though the person is looking this way, and there's a reason for it. I'll explain it in just a moment. Hopefully, here we'll try it again. Maybe this one's going to be worse. You don't know. Oh well. It is what it is. I can't do any better right now. He's got blue eyes. This is going to represent the thickness of the skull. Okay? And this is going to represent the pineal chakra. And I'm doing it in red with a little black line, because most people, when they psychically see it, they see it either as red or black. Okay. And there's one beam that comes straight out of the crown chakra, and it's a straight beam and it looks like it's been cut off. It is exactly the same size as the breathing tube, and it's inside the breathing tube, so it's hard to distinguish those psychically when you're looking at them. But it is not cut off straight because it fits into a sphere, so it has a slight curve. And then there is another one that comes out here, out the third eye, and another one that comes out the back of the third eye, another one that comes down inside the throat. And there is another one that comes up here, which we call either the unicorn or the 45. And it comes out the back, kind of like this. And then there's one coming out the side on both sides, one coming out this way and one coming out this way. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of these coming out. There's another slot right here at the chin and going out this way, and that's for somebody else, not for you. I'll explain it, what it is. But I think I'm running out of time. I got 2 minutes, okay. I don't think I can do it in 2 minutes. But this has to do with a certain kind of person. We think of ascending. We think of going up in consciousness. But when you get all the way to the top, guess what? You come back down. So there's about half of life going ascending, and there's about half of life descending. And when they descend, you can tell by looking at them because they'll have, I would return this.